Okay, my friends. So now we are going to get into we're still in part two, but we're going to shift gears away from Ben Snowfall and look at, well, the whole point of this next bit is actually to demonstrate what can happen as you consume, especially line graphs or bar graphs in the news. This one is about Papa John's Pizza, and you might not know about them anymore because they went through a bunch of stuff about 3-4 years ago now, when it turns out that their CEO, Papa John Schnatter, is actually a racist pig, and he was caught on hot mic making some horrible, horrible racist comments, and that was the result. This graph is the result of that. Papa's plunge. So you can see, the stock price is up here, and then it goes poof, and it looks like it plunges. So we're gonna look at that mathematically and see what this plunge is all about. So this is stock price. It's a time series line graph because you've got months: January, February, March, April, May, June. And these are just 7 months, but it looks like we've got it broken up by days within those months. That's why there's always a little difference. So, January 1st through 31st and so forth. What was Papa John's stock price in dollars at its highest valued point in 2018 on this graph? Okay, so it looks like it's up here, and again, the graph is not hugely helpful, but it looks like it's okay. So if I draw here, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be a little bit creative here. Whoops. I'm gonna be a little bit creative, and I'm gonna take a snip of this, and I'm gonna put it in Microsoft Paint, which is always my program of choice when it comes to making quick edits on documents like this. Okay. So I'm going to now I gotta move this out of the way, grab a line drawing tool. I'm gonna make it a bright color that I can see, like green. And I'm gonna draw that line. Okay, that looks pretty, okay, yeah. That looks like it goes through the top of that highest point in the graph. Now, if I look over here, I'm gonna look at this axis, it looks like the numbers go up by 5. So 70 to 65, 65 to 60, it's every 5 it jumps. Okay, good. So this looks like it's just past halfway. So that might be something like 68, maybe 68 and a half. So I'm going to write down that number. I'm going to call that 68 and a half. The high is $68.50. That's the highest. Okay. I have a feeling I know what's coming next. Yeah, the lowest. So back to paint. The lowest, I'm going to make this a different color green. Ooh, it just changed my line to that color green, so I'll use the original color. The lowest looks like it's down here, doesn't it? So I'm just going to draw this across and try to hold it flat. There we go. That looks like it's catching the bottom. Now again, 70, 65, 60, 55, 50, 45 would be about here. So I'm going to call that 48. I'm going to call it 48 at the lowest. So that looks like it's about where it goes, about 48. Okay. Now, next question. The low price is about what percent of the high price? Okay, we got this. We got this. So in order to answer that question, we just form the percent. It's of the high price. So low is the part, 48 divided by the whole, which is 68.50. So it's about 70%. It's about 70%. It fell about 30%, but it's about 70% of the high price. This is 70% of this. Cool? Hopefully that makes sense. Part over whole, part over whole. Now, we're going to look at that same graph a different way. Same exact graph, but what I did now was I added lines in. Now these lines, I'm actually going to drop these into Paint as well. What the lines are doing is helping us measure the distance. They're helping us measure the distance from the horizontal axis up to the data point. Because that is really, right? That's what these numbers are supposed to be showing you. They're supposed to be showing you the distance up you go. Okay. About how many of the yellow bar will it take to make up the length of the red bar? Well, this is the beauty of Paint. I can actually copy that and we can figure it out. So let's select that, copy, and paste. Okay, now we can actually, I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to try to get it a little bit more of a tight copy. There we go. That way I can actually use it like a ruler. Okay, so there's 1. I may have to zoom in a little bit here. Okay. So now I'm gonna have to scooch. I'm making up my own ruler, if that makes sense. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, getting there, 7, 8. Oh, it looks like almost exactly 9. Just shy of 9. 9. It's pretty close to 9 of them. So it takes. That's a little zoom down a little bit far. It takes 9 of these to equal this one. Just shy of 9. I mean, I'm going to call it 9, and that's okay. So to answer this question, it takes 9 of these to be that, which means this, the whole is 9, the part is 1, which means percentage-wise, 1/9 is 11%. So this distance is 11% of this distance. Said a different way, if we ignore the numbers on the side and just use what the graph looks like, it looks like the stock lost almost 90% of its value because it's only 11%, which is very close to 10%. So I just said compare that answer, 11%, with the one you got back in 28, which was the 70%. They're nowhere near each other. But how can they be nowhere near each other if you pull them from the same graph? How can you look at the same graph 2 different ways, right? How can you look at the same graph 2 different ways and get 2 horribly different answers? And the answer is this. Let me zoom out here. This is what the graph with the yellow and the red on it should look like. If I have to zoom out so far, I have to look at both pages. I'm sorry about this, friends. You have the note sheet in front of you, so you can actually just read along with it. The problem is, if we're looking at the yellow and red bars, and you're measuring height above the horizontal, your brain, whether you know it or not, your brain assumes that this bar down here starts at 0. But this does not start at 0. This starts at about 45, which means you're not seeing, dear friends, you're not seeing the bar go all the way down. Now, it's the same graph as this one. These graphs side by side are exactly the same graph, except what I did was I added the correct bottom part on that graph, which now goes all the way down to 0, which is where that line should be. Just to give you a reinforcement of this idea, when I was going over this graph with a coworker, a math department coworker, and actually this graph up here, and I said, what do you think that price is right there? You know what they said? They said 25. Because it looks like it's halfway between 50 and this, and they called this 0. Their brain assumed it was 0, but it's not. Not the way this person drew the graph, it's not. It's 45 or 46 even, maybe. So that's too far out. Let me zoom back in. So these graphs, this graph is very similar to the last one we saw because they're both showing the same data. But it's different. It's different because it truly drops this bar all the way down to the bottom, which is 0. Now I said, look back to 28 and 30. Those are those 2 percentages that you got very, very different results from. Which answer does this correct graph more closely align with? It's gotta be the 70%. Because this yellow bar, if you look at this yellow bar compared to the red bar, it's way more than half. It's somewhere between half and all the way, which is about 70%. So in other words, that when you ignored the way these numbers looked and just pulled them from the axis, you got the right answer. If you ignored the numbers and only looked at the heights, what appeared to be on the graph, you got the wrong answer. That's because this graph was drawn a very specific way to make you think that. Now, let's talk about why. We just talked about why. Because this graph doesn't go down to 0. The next question, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. Give one reason the creator of the original graph might have done that. So here's the original graph. Let's go back to it. It's right here. Papa's plunge. I can think of at least 2 reasons. First of all, it's convenient, right? I mean, there's a bunch of blank space under this that I had to create in this graph, right? That graph's a little bit, it's probably hard to fit on a web page. People aren't going to see that as well as they see this. So one is convenience, but the other one too is, look at the title, Papa's plunge. It looks way more drastic this way. It looks like it lost almost all of its value this way. So it drives home the point of the plunge. Now, I'm not saying that losing 30% of value is not terrible, but this doesn't look like it's losing 30% of value. It looks like it's losing almost all of its value. And the way they control for that, dear friends, is by not having that graph start at 0. That's a big one. Watch out for that. Okay, this video is long enough. Let's make the next one start here.